Witam po przerwie.
Welcome after the break. My name is Marek Salamak, and let's continue discussing BIM contents. And this time, now it will be a discussion panel. This panel will be devoted to managing of BIM rules in family libraries, and this is called BIM Content. And the introduction was before the break to the panel, and now we have the same panelists in the studio, and one of them will be connected online. Let me just remind you that after the discussion, the panel discussion, where we will have questions, pre-prepared questions, so there will be also an option for you to ask your questions using the chat. Please input your questions in chat, please ask your questions in chat, and please directly, clearly say who the question goes to. And let me just remind you about the contest, on knowledge contest on BIM, and you can win BIM books published by PWN Publishing House. Let me introduce three speakers. Three of them are with us. Three panelists are Marcin Michalski, BIM streamer, managing partner. Welcome. Rafał Muz, alias, and Maciej Spis, AAC Design. And we are connected with Piotr Uszkiewicz, CE Group. We have a short delay, couple of seconds, this might be visible. And in this session, the plenary session, we had wonderful presentations. I'm really impressed, and the BIM content was mentioned several times. And so before we start discussing or answering the questions, I'd like you to say a couple of sentences and why manufacturers and suppliers and designers like Piotr should be interested in this. Marcin, would you be able to say first that generally BIM content has different definitions. In Polish, we also reference it as BIM object, BIM libraries, but in fact, it is a digital representation of a product which is used in BIM projects. This can be shafts or the hydration systems or windows. So whatever can be used can be in BIM. So this is a file which has some information, geometrical information and non-geometrical information. For majority, this can be surprised that BIM projects don't necessarily have information like paints or other layer structures. They should have information as the I letter. It is of key importance in BIM. Why should we use BIM libraries? As in terms of manufacturers, let me leave it for Rafał to discuss, but in terms of the designing offices, it is to facilitate the process, and also as we have our internal libraries, and if you manufacture different designs, if you produce different designs in different teams, different groups, so the BIM libraries creating teams will facilitate implementation of your project, and this will reduce the costs. So what is your perspective as a manufacturer? I believe that it is a couple of years or a dozen or so years when we have started to be interested in BIM. Sometimes for us, we want to tighten the cooperation between ourselves and our customers. And in the past, we were not talking with the customers so frequently. And a huge, vast part of our sales goes through distributors. But we want to tighten the cooperation with designers and contractors. And the designers who have already transferred from CAD to BIM, they ask us about Revit families which could be used in the designs. So if they are advanced enough in the designing process to be able to do it, as at the very beginning nobody is able to start using this. As the manufacturers, of course, we are all of them from the day zero. The model include our elements only and would not be replaced by others, but it is not possible So we concentrate on the BIM objects or the BIM libraries to be a carrier of information, and it should be enough volume of information. So some people probably are overimpressed, and they believe that they have everything in it, and they want probably to have hundreds of parameters, and but the designers remove 95 parameters out of 100, so they clean the parameters. So this is a new challenge to have a different approach, a totally new approach to this thing, and to increase the range, and to improve the cooperation possibilities. Marcin mentioned what it is and why we are interested in it. Of course, the customers are happy to do it. And as I said in my presentation, we want to meet the requirements of our customers if they are realistic. So it also affects our brain. So this is how our brain works. So unnecessary information is removed from our brain, and we also need to do the same with our models. Or we need to rename them. And now let's ask a question. Could you answer the question about your perspective as a designer? How designers use external BIM libraries they get from manufacturers? If it is the case, is the interest in these files the same for all the categories of elements? Piotr, would you are a representative of designers? From the perspective of designers, we can say that as designers, we expect, we can say, ready libraries generating no problems at the designing phase. And most frequently, these libraries can be downloaded from web pages of manufacturers, and things are different. It is different with that. And there are some libraries which can wonderfully be used for work, but there are also others which generate a lot of problems. And in terms of the demand for categories, majority cases, what we need, it is like mechanical devices or non-linear elements or items. So these are the things which are the most numerous in the design, and we support manufacturers in adding those. But the situation is different and variable. When you download libraries from manufacturers, sometimes if you try to input it into Revit, you get a message that the versions of libraries are intended for Revit version from like 4 or 5 years ago. So over that time, a couple of years, manufacturers, nobody updated the libraries. And despite the fact Revit can use libraries from previous versions, the structure and some interrelationships of the libraries are differently organized, and not always they meet our requirements when we use them in the up-to-date versions of Revit, and they generate problems. So from the designer's perspective, we would expect some kind of cooperation with manufacturers and information sharing for the libraries to be tailor-made, and for the designers to have no problems to use them. Thank you. So let's have now a perspective of companies advising, supporting designers. Maciej, AE Design, you support designers. What is your perspective? How do you perceive this problem? So from the perspective of a company which manufactures this kind of content, we generate quite a lot of libraries, but we also generate quite a lot of things which surround the libraries and the families, those files which can be used by the designers. So this is only one part of the story. And we also support the process with some systems which arrange the cooperation of libraries with the design. But let me also mention that outside of using of libraries by the designers, from the perspective of real products, we can also divide the libraries into those which are actual products. It's important, and a relationship of a manufacturer and the designer. But there are also libraries which are used only internally, And some manufacturers not only manufacture and sell, but they also do some internal solutions which help to create R&D database, and they also developed this internally. But it is also, we also built for designers some families which can be used independently from manufacturers. This is something universal, and of key importance is the approach to both designer and the manufacturer to combine these two worlds. That's what my colleagues have just mentioned, and this is to limit the number of parameters, of measures which are unnecessary, and also our approach to the libraries, as mentioned by Marcin, as we have manufacturers of paints and they want us to include their products in the database, but by the end of the day they limit themselves with providing information which can only be included in a simple statement. So it is difficult to create a family for paints which can be added to facilities. And strictly talking about installations, and on the one hand, I will agree with Piotr that frequently these libraries are commissioned by manufacturers. They just want to be in BIM, and they want to do anything which can be part of BIM. But in fact, as Piotr said, sometimes things are all not up-to-date, obsolete, and they have nothing to do with any standards. And this is something what we will discuss later, probably, and probably there are not well recognized standards, but we want to tend to keep control of that, at least. As a company creating objects, we want to be on as high level as possible. So our intent originally was to speak in English, but as we are alone, we are all Poles on the stage, so that would be probably artificial if we spoke in English. So now let's move on to creating of the process of BIM library creation. So if you finish with Revit families, does that mean that the task is completed, you can put a check mark, and you are fully ready to participate in BIM projects? Is it the case? Again, I need to come back to the fact that inputting of libraries just for the sake of inputting them, it is erroneous approach. Even if you are successful, even if on the website there are a couple of files to be downloaded, as a manufacturer you can be happy, but it can be multiple times downloaded. But that's the question about the completion. We need to come back to good planning. What should the final result be? And going through all the files and designing of the functionalities which need to be operational, and you also need to verify all the things. It needs to be confirmed by the feedback from testers or designers that this is operational thing, and also the coherence. So if you create some sets of libraries, sets of families, they need to have some common features. So one range should not be different than other ranges of products of the same manufacturer. Like AliAxis, we have plenty of ranges of products worldwide, and they are sometimes created as families by different people, different parts of the world. And so all these things should be coherent, and people like Piotr should be able to use this on any stage of a project, of a design, from very general concepts where you can use elements which are in default condition, not to have problems when you start developing, and not to have problems with the communication of individual items. If we want to discuss optimization or some specific solutions. What's the case with you? I believe bigger or smaller manufacturers are also very big manufacturers, and not all of them can afford to have comprehensive approach. In the Axis group, we had Our approach was all of us were doing independently. We are present worldwide, and only recently we have started working more centrally and taking into account the requirements in all the locations where we are present. And this central approach, planning of a standard, some kind of templates we want to use, have brought us to the point where we create a better quality family. So as it was mentioned, things were not perfect in the past. So we wanted just to say that we are online. We have checked this, and we were checking how those numbers of downloads were increasing, and we were happy to see that people are interested in our product. That's like in Facebook. We just wanted to have likes, and so we have like in Brazil, in Singapore. So we saw that people were downloading quite a lot of our products. As people. As our fittings, there are some people interested in our fittings in Brazil. Does that mean that we want to enter that market without understanding the reasons why the BIM centers are located there, why the people are interested there? It is difficult to do things without it. So many manufacturers can check it and say, okay, we have done this, we have spent some money, and also the marketing budget paid for this, and we as Early Access try to use the libraries internally as well. And we, of course, don't want designers to start this overnight, and we do not expect that they will immediately contact us to buy the product, but we want to build teams being able to help people to answer the questions if people download our library, and if things don't work. There are also some technological limits, like Revit. Even best libraries will not be able to overcome those. So without people being able to explain why things do not work, it may turn out that people say that the library is of poor quality. But sometimes it might be the case that people don't know how to work even with a generic library. So they expected it to be a magic tool, magic solution. But we try to build tools or solutions which would be able to use those libraries. So in a interface of contractors and designers, that's the target. As creating of libraries, this is not the final, this is not the end. 5 years ago it was enough, but now it is a must-have, and manufacturers should take a comprehensive approach, and without this, I think their sale will not increase, but probably within the next 5 or 10 years, customers, the number of customers will increase, like from 1 in a month to 10 in a month. So this. So this will be like a qualifier, and this will help us not to lose sales instead of helping us to increase the sales. This is so as estimation. And looking forward, this is also very risky. We know what is happening worldwide. Can you advise, can you help on how to use libraries? Yes, of course. And so we need to consider what if the libraries are in place. But this is something similar to as building or erecting of a building. When you build, so when you have your building ready, you need to manage it. If it is planned on the stage of designing, then managing will be easier. If you don't think about this at the designing phase, it will be more complicated. The same is with libraries. You need to be aware who will be using those. For the designing offices, designing companies, this will be like in-house employees who can use who will be using them for different designs. For manufacturing, this can be different designers from different countries. Like in Early Access, you can use different brands. So from the perspective of the process of creating of libraries, we need to consider what to do to adjust easily a library to a standard mentioned by Maciek, but these standards paradoxically can be different depending on who and where is using them. So we believe that preparing of BIM libraries should be based on the fact that BIM libraries, paradoxically, should not include any product information. So this is a template model. That's what we create, and the product information needs to be added separately and injected automatically. If you want to do it manually, of course, nobody would be happy to maintain this. But with the automatic injection of information to the BIM library, you can easily create a library which is in compliance with standards. If you do things automatically, human errors are eliminated. Additionally, you can verify compliance with your internal standards, but not only internal standards, you can verify your compliance with external standards as well, like SIM standard. Also, you can easily adjust the library to the needs of individual design, individual investor, or individual market. Very primary thing like language. In Poland, the library can be generated with the Polish attributes, with Polish features, but in Germany, the same library can be generated in the German language. So the matter of library managing is quite important, and very frequently it appears on the level when they are being created. So the libraries should be created for them to be easy adjustable, and it doesn't matter how good your libraries are, if they are not published, nobody will use them. And depending on the preferences, designing preferences, the markets, you may have different locations where a designer may wish to download your libraries. If we talk about the internal projects, the libraries will be downloaded from a central repository within the construction company or a designing office. If we speak about the internal libraries, like manufacturers' libraries, so these communication channels between manufacturer and designer, there can be multiple of them. These can be like plugins, like the manufacturer websites like AliAccess. These can be external BIM portals, and recently we have also observed a trend. Wholesalers, they want to supply BIM libraries, and this is how they want to fuel their sales. So this is quite natural trend. And let's look now how can we manage BIM content within a designing office. I think quite many designers are with us now, and probably they would like to know how to do it. What is your case? There are different options of managing the libraries. You can use it, you can do it online. There are different forms useful for this. In our office, we download the libraries, we download the BIM content from different sources, and those sources can be more or less verified, not to generate chaos in the models or in the design. They are put into the waiting room, what we call it, on the server, where they are verified by people having correct knowledge on the libraries. They are verified from the perspective on how they behave in the design, about the parameters. They are verified on generating conflicts within the designing files. And if those libraries are pass our internal test, if they meet the requirements, they are put in the folder where people can download them and use them in their designing process. Maciej? What is the case with other designers? What is your perspective? From our perspective as AC Design, we also carry out quite large number of trainings on both the basic level. We mainly speak about designers, and the truth is that we want to try to increase the awareness of what a family can be within a design. It is a quite difficult situation. Not all our partners understand this, and sometimes a design can have its own life. And as Piotr said, This is a process of approving and keeping control of that is very important, particularly if you are a small designing office like 3-4 people. So the challenges are smaller, but if we speak about huge projects where we have a dozen or a couple of dozens of people, many projects you work on, so this might be the case that people will make some changes, something probably was missing, and in fact, this item has its own life. So there is a local version of this one item within the design. So there are some rules, there are some standards of processes which need to be followed. And when we make implementations, we also pay attention to this as security of information and certainty of information, how the items behave, offers guarantees coherence of all these items within the design. Doesn't matter if you use manufacturers' designs. In Revit, there is no option, no functionality which would allow you to lock addition of these items. So this is a larger problem, and in Revit, over the process of creating of contents, which might be more advanced and can use more advanced options, you will not be able to protect it. There are some families which can be created internally for the purposes of one organization, and they are not happy to share this as this will make this visible, what you do with things. And we have some customers who are never releasing their items. So this is very important for one organization. Do you also have contacts with designers? Generally, in terms of the BIM libraries, as Marcin said, when they are included in a project, they have their own life. So the BIM library managing system should allow this BIM content to be online, and it should be connected with the central repository. So if you make a change, this change should not be made locally. It should be propagated somehow. So you can define the level of information on the primary, on the conceptual phase. The volume of information can be relatively low, but farther you go, when you develop your project, you will need more specific information, and this information can be easily dynamically provided to BIM libraries. And you don't have to download your BIM library from a central server, and 95% of attributes mentioned by Rafał, but you can define in the system, in a managing system, the level of information, and you can download the information dynamically. And the process of updating and this library life can be significantly reduced, or it can be even totally eliminated. And additionally, the libraries evolve. Also, some new demands may occur. Why not to use a library which was used in one design and somehow evolved, and probably it can be just added to the central managing system as another version, and all the designs can automatically replace it. Of course, if it is required, it shouldn't be made automatically. Some people may not be happy to do that, but sometimes you may have as many versions of libraries individually that at the end, connecting all of them is impossible. And the different thing is that as a part of public tenders, you can use external manufacturers' libraries, and it might be very difficult, particularly for people who are responsible for content management in designing offices, designing companies, and also it should be not to make work of designers more difficult. It should be important to anonymize, and So to control what data is injected into the BIM content, you can also generate content which is anonymized, and to be able to use it.
Yes, really, BIM content management in relation to public procurement is a difficult task. I wanted to talk to you about BIM portals, and of course not those which are distributing knowledge on BIM, but those which make it possible to download BIM libraries. I would avoid mentioning names of those portals here, but is it the same? I mean, the BIM portals, is it the same as BIM content management platforms? And what are the differences between these solutions? Maybe Marcin, your turn. Thank you for this question, because it is very interesting, especially in the context of the fact that majority of people, especially when they contact us, they classify us as a BIM portal. So even on our web page, we placed a sub-page that we are not a BIM portal, and there is a matrix comparing what is BIM content management and what a BIM portal actually is. And it is easiest, abstracting from construction, what a BIM portal is. It is a kind of a marketplace. It's like Allegro, Amazon, or eBay, but products are not physical products, but BIM objects. And it's fine that you are not buying them there, you are just downloading, and people who want to display them are paying, because for them it is an advertisement. But that's all. And in BIM portals are static files. Static, I'm stressing, because they are not updating themselves and adjusting to the specific needs of people who want to make use of them. So when I enter a BIM portal, and for example, I would like to download Aliaxis family down to Polish market, I should download that family with the number of options available in the Polish market, and not in global market, where the number of options may be much greater, and that perhaps may introduce a variety of errors in projects. Another thing is how up-to-date these information items are. If it is static data, so until somebody manually update them, they will have data from well, say before, from some time. Well, a question of updating data in these is a critical thing, especially in construction. It may be related not only to financial costs for designer and producer, first of all, but manufacturer, but also image costs. And finally, we have to consider if we are a construction producer, manufacturer, or even a design office. So do we want to be limited to publishing our objects on Allegro, or do we really want to have a system which would adapt those libraries to appropriate requirements, which would be updating them upon our request, and using which we would have easy access to those? The question is whether, I mean, regarding BIM portals, is access that easy? And from image perspective, referring to the manufacturer, I think the manufacturer, the producer, should have their own BIM platform promoting them, first of all, and from the perspective of the manufacturer, of the producer, communicates with designers rather than using third-party pages. Well, those third-party web pages may be useful. For Uponor company, we created one based on BIM Content Manager, BIM Stream, and then BIM Streamer can publish information not only on the producer's web page, not only in the plugin, but we also publish information for external portals, because we promote them as additional marketing channels where the given product can be placed. And if we look at the market of portals, yes, there is one main player, but if we focus on specific regions, then we can see that depending on regions, there are local players who have a greater market share. I don't know how to say it in Polish. Well, the share in the market locally, is greater, but not necessarily globally it is. So if we want to reach and get to somebody in Poland, we will not use the main BIM portal, best known worldwide. I will avoid using the name, but we will use our local player because it is about access to Polish designers, Polish programmers, because the market is bigger there. And doing it individually, manually, for each and every market to adapt these data for each market, for each brand of Aliaxis Group, it might be quite a difficult task. Yes, maybe we should have talked English, but difficulty finding appropriate Polish equivalents of terminology. But, well, Rafał, you had some experience with BIM portals. Well, I think every producer who started getting interested in BIM, most probably first they got into one of the pages, like a BIM portal. I will avoid using names, but best BIM Libraries.pl or BIMLibraries.com. And these platforms, those portals, well, portals, they have their place in the environment among us, and the problem appeared only when they were the only place where we made those libraries available. From my perspective, and I think and I hope that most people may agree with me, the best source of information would be the web page of a given producer. We looking for information of specific car brand, I guess we will be looking for the information at the web page of that brand and then on other platforms describing it. And the same situation is with our products and our libraries. So first step is towards us, and then we go to other channels, other portals. And for this, we need some system which will allow us to publish it in those numerous places to avoid us doing it manually, creating 10, 20 local copies and changing names manually or clicking everything out through long working hours. And if something got changed, we have to click it out in those 20 different versions. So BIM content management is needed in order to later be able to publish it in various locations. So an integral part of our whole approach and how we want to be doing it a little better, because this problem of BIM libraries from the past being of lower quality, say 5, 6 years ago, was based on them being too static, and they were frozen when being created. And most often, people at the producer's side didn't have enough experience, or that was not their area of interest in order to carry out those topics later on. But they ticked it off, and this was, yes, at that stage it was done probably well. But over the recent 3-5 years, even software itself for modeling in BIM or for the project for designing is also developing going forward. So what was possibly not possible a few years ago, now it can be possible to be done. Unfortunately, that freezing in time is a problem of portals, and having a tool for managing it, we can relatively automatically publish it from time to time and say, now it got changed, we are putting on a new version, it's up to date. But everybody have exactly the same version from our source. So we are the owner of the whole information, but we are only using it as like a shop window. Okay, we have discussed BIM portals. So now, how can we tighten cooperation between a designer and producer, manufacturer? So here, apart from giving availability of libraries, can such relations be in place? Well, I think majority of producers of construction materials have a technical support department, and in most cases it is so that the telephone calls, some hints on how to touch up the design work. There happen to be small, almost design types of work where we cooperate with designers and help them to calculate something, to select something, because as producers, I think we know our materials best. We invented them, we are producing them, and if we didn't know characteristics of those products, something would be wrong. So in order to tighten this cooperation outside libraries alone, because perhaps 5 years ago it might have been sufficient, but now designers expect of us, or contractors or investors expect of us to be giving something extra. And in the digital area, that means design construction processes utilizing BIM, there is a chance for us to be helping designers to carry out certain tasks which used to be taking a lot of their time in the past. And for this, appropriate tools or services from us are needed. As Aliaxis Group, we are working now on certain tools, services. For the time being, I'm not able to tell you much more about it. I think at the next infraBIM, we may discuss it in more detail. I mean, that's what I'm enigmatically mentioned. But these tools and services are based on our libraries, so it is a next step. As I said in my presentation, we want to go a step higher, which is related to that more tight cooperation. I think designers who participate in the event today or will contact us in future will be open for that cooperation. Perhaps in the past they actually got put off by the libraries, but now we want to clear up the air around us. Please tell us if something is wrong. Let us know. If designers or contractors have some idea, well, they say we would like the producers, I mean manufacturers or designers to help us. If it is something what we can do, we are open. Yes, okay. Yes, Rafał, it is a good idea, and I think BIM content will be of more and more significance in the whole BIM methodology, and I think not one session, not one discussion panel, but the whole day. Well, and Piotr, what do you think about your relationship with producers and suppliers? Well, I would add here two issues, because a lot has been said by my predecessors about cooperation of all parties who are using the Revit families or libraries. 2 points. Well, from designers' perspective, we would like producers to focus on practical form of utilizing families. Here, I mean characteristics of sectors providing services for our offices. I mean installatory ones. Over years, we know that BIM models are becoming broader and broader. This results in the need to break them down into smaller portions, like the sectoral parts. Looking at the example of our sector, installatory and architecture models. And in such case, families working installatory models to which architectural models are related behave slightly different as if we were using them in only one Revit BIM model. So having excellently prepared families which fulfill expectations, it doesn't mean that they will behave correctly with models of looking from design installatory office perspective. So the second, it would be good to pay more attention at testing families, both in Revit environment as well as in also during their behavior when exporting them to open IFC format, because not always this export is obvious and looks problem-free from the perspective of parameters which are exported to IFC format. Here we may say that Revit families are like small programs or small scripts which play their role in this all huge BIM system, and like programs need being tested before implementation or letting them to the market. Also, Revit families should undergo such a process, and then we will be able to say that this is a ready-made product and supplied to the market for sure it will fulfill expectations and will be possible to be effectively used, in our case, during design process. Thank you, Piotr. This was the last question we have prepared for this discussion panel. So I would like to thank all my guests for their response, for the discussion. Please stay with us, because on the chat we noted some questions addressed at them. So let me remind you about writing your questions in the chat and about the competition. You can also use the networking platform on your participant panel, and directly contact the experts and learn how in your premises to create, well, like BIM content management tools. Let's look at the questions. Well, there are at least 4 people here, but there are more questions because some asked too. The first one is from Mr. Marcin Pszczółka, asking Rafał, do BIM components have various LOD levels? Hi, Marcin. Good question, and very often we have been considering it as well, whether there is really a need to create several levels of detail for geometry and information. Well, maybe at earlier stages of design, nobody is interested in 30 various parameters. Only later, at the stage of implementation or post-implementation, we have to gradually add them, so the level of detail of information will be increasing following the increase or the growth of the project. Regarding geometrical detail level, I think there are certain elements which make sense there, because these are architectural elements where initially we are interested only in what size that is, and later with visualizations or as built, we want to know a little bit more precisely what it looks like. I represent Aliaxis Group, and we as a producer focus on systems of sanitary and water installations, and there only one level of geometrical detail is, either it is in the design or it is not there. Of course, you may be creating elements like Revit families of profiles which have a logo of our company. It would be going too far, because these are in most cases not maintainable assets, as we call them. These are not those which end up in databases of people who manage the building afterwards. So if this is an element which is interesting geometrically and from information point of view, it should have a few information detail level. But if it is just a simple grouting or floor slab, so there is no need, and we had to create our own libraries, selecting a level which is sufficiently good but without exaggerating. And can you increase the level of detail adequately to the maturity of the project itself? I think Maciek can tell us more. There are methods of creating content in such a way that it magically almost changes by itself. Yes, we of course have tools available when creating families to have this detail level to be rooted in this object, but usually it uses the replacement of geometry from a simple one to more complex one. And what Rafał mentioned here, once we have objects which are really, which would not be much different from the simplified form, going to the target form. If we select the target level detail, which will not be presenting unnecessary elements, but it will convey the character of the object, its size and dimensions. So with such simple objects, we are only increasing the weight, the size of the file. So artificially, we are building levels of detail where we have the megabytes in the project, which we will not actually use in case of those elements. Thank you very much on behalf of Marcin. And the second question is from Professor Adam Klema from Poznań University of Technology, addressing Marcin. A very detailed question, so I'm scared what Adam wrote. Well, he asked for presenting access to data through digital identifiers and data specified by producer in network systems. Good afternoon, Adam. Even recently, we had the pleasure participating in a project which at Poznań University of Technology got the first award as the most innovative product in construction. I saw it in the presentation. Yes, a student whose promoter was Adam, actually, based preparation of content on BIM Streamer platform. And besides that, it used GF1 group identifiers, and most probably Adam is relating to this in a way. Well, first of all, when we are managing BIM libraries, we are able to easily introduce various identifiers in those BIM libraries, which as a target may be identifying this product. That product may be identified based on a specific producer, like identifier, Getin from GS1 can supply us with something like this, or it can be identified based on a set of features, not necessarily identifying a specific producer. In such case, an identifier like this may be ETIM class. ETIM class defining convector, for example, without pointing at a specific producer. So a convector which has to have a set of attributes, and perhaps based on this, it can be dropped into bill of materials and then in an anonymous way, be selected from available pool of products. So by all means, BIM libraries can be used for identification, and this can be both identification based on specific names of producers or models, or based on a set of features of the given product. Thank you for the answer. Thank you, Adam, for the question. And a question from Karol. It is addressed at all speakers, all panelists, so please think who will be able to answer it. Shouldn't there be a web page existing where all errors could be notified on? People would avoid making the same mistakes, and it would serve improvements. We may call it a page of good practices to learn what is working, what is not. Who is ready to answer? Well, let me try to start from the perspective of a person training users of Revita, because I understand it is addressed at errors related to modeling practice or making those projects design work, because it can be broken down into errors made in production of the BIM content. So these are things interrelated, but they can be separated depending on the scenario. And actually, objective statement whether something is an error and mispractice may be difficult. More going towards good practices would be better. And here we can return to the topic of achieving certain standards. There are various types of movements related to BIM environment, but also construction. Both in Poland and globally, we have several of those standards. And here, preparing together with Aliaxis Group an internal standard related to creating those families, we quite strongly looked into all standards which are in operation around. So referring to these documents is one thing, but practices resulting from activities by designers. So it's about towards Piotr and other designers who would like to share their knowledge, but not necessarily, because here we are, of course, talking about competitiveness. We know that this market has such features that together we want to increase the quality of all that to be able to cooperate in it, but competitiveness of design offices from the perspective of knowledge gained and trainings you pay for and things created together with experts, I think that could be the greatest obstacle against sharing all the best features we have found. But ideas actually implemented in discussion forums operate anywhere, and that is a good place where you can find that kind of knowledge. And from the perspective of the BIM content, actually we creating, producers ordering, then they get well, I miss a Polish word, so feedback from users, from designers. It is the place where it appears at the end of the day what is the value of it at the end of the day in use, in practical use. So this is the greatest value, in my opinion, which can be conveyed among people who are users. Well, would anybody like to add something to this? I would add regarding, because what for this question was asked, in order to for BIM content to have fewer errors. This was one of the solutions proposed by our viewer, but those solutions eliminating or reducing number of errors, well, they can be many, and here we perhaps could focus on how to cure the reason rather than the result of those errors, and the origin rather than result. And we worked, it was not on Ali-Axis project, but a project from a different producer, and I got an inquiry, a question from a person preparing content with information. Hey, Marcin, but your solution was aimed at improving the creation of content, and I keep getting information that I have to be correcting something because it is not working here, not working there, and all in all, it is not speeding me up, but slowing me down. So I answered, I will use a fictitious name. Well, Tom, for example, because, you know, once we inject the data automatically, we do it for all possible data combinations. And simply for one of the combinations, this content actually goes into pieces. And this moment, we can see that we are able to verify such geometry before we actually let it go to public circulation. And of course, forums Maciej mentioned are by all means useful, but simply let us do something in order to eliminate the need to make use of them, and let us validate the content. I understand that with such a portfolio content, Aliax has, well, manual validation would be not good, but you don't need to do it. If we have data, if we have inner standards, why couldn't we validate the content from the perspective of data structure? If we want to be in line with some internal or external structure, we can validate the data automatically, well, using, among others, BIM content management. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have actually concluded all questions from the chat. Thank you very much for the discussion and for your responses. Now